Just as Return of the King has the biggest canvas of the three movies, the most spectacular visuals, that obviously impacted hugely on the sound department. Creating the soundtrack, the sound effects, the sound design of the films, they had to come up with material that was going to match the visuals.
We always knew that we were in for a hard ride with Return of the King. It's a big movie, much bigger than the other two. But this time around, we thought we had a handle on things.
So the challenges became probably how to exceed from film 2, from The Two Towers, how to make it even better.
One of the neat things about working with Peter is that it feels like there really are no rules. You know, either it works or it doesn't work. But there's not a lot of sort of preconceived notions about, oh no, we can't do that, that's too crazy. One of the scenes that we got a sort of initial version of was the siege on Minas Tirith when the catapult battle starts.
Ethan played it to Peter down at the theatre, and Pete just kind of said, well, have you actually heard a kind of 2-ton rock landing? Because this is what they're going to be. They're going to be bits of these buildings kind of flying over, and they're going to land on the ground. And kind of, have you actually heard it? And Ethan hadn't.
He's like, why don't you just go out and do it? I'm like, that's a good idea. We'll do that. We found a crane yard up in Poirua, which is just north of Wellington, where they were willing to raise these heavy 2-ton concrete blocks 60 feet up in the air on these cranes.
And we'd spread out a number of mics just sort of at various different distances. We had a couple of microphones buried about a foot and a half deep.
And the condom, it's to just keep some moisture off it, basically, keep it clean. There's the first one going in. We're just trying to get the sound of, whatever travels through the earth. Sound a little bit different.
We wanted to make sure that we didn't blow it, because you never know what you're going to get when you go to record these type of things. If it's going to be really loud, it's going to be quiet. So we probably had 7 or 8 recorders going with all different positions.
Some of the recordings are just extraordinary. You can hear the thing coming towards you. And of course we built a big crater, because we dropped it so many times. And then we kind of started filling the crater up with things.
And drop them onto all kinds of different surfaces. It was fantastic because it gave us the sound that we wouldn't have gotten any other way. In this extended edition, the Caves of the Dead obviously has been vastly expanded, and now we have this scene with this avalanche of skulls that come down.
So we've been working with a number of different things to try and create what we perceive that sound to be, since we don't have 60,000 human skulls at our disposal.
And coconuts, sort of come to mind, obviously. So then we took a bunch of them over to one of the sound stages and just took boxes of them and just poured them out on the ground.
We were able to rent 20 kilos of walnuts, $1 for a half day per kilo. Apparently, walnut renting is a decent business in Wellington.
Great sound, but walnuts are going to have a very bright sound quality to them, and then thousands of them, it becomes this wall of unpleasantness. Once it gets to the theater, though, I can say, it's a cool sound, so let's work with it so that we can keep what is cool about it, but get rid of the offending nature of it. It's kind of the arc of creating the track.
It's sticky. What is it?
Peter hates spiders, and so rather than sort of shy away, he wanted to sort of push the Shelob sequence into a place where Shelob couldn't be anything but the most slimy, spooky, nasty piece of spider business.
I made my first pass at doing the Shelob vocal with this alien head. The thing that I was afraid of was that it might not be scary enough. It had lots of personality, and had all the qualities that you might hear from a giant spider, but the one thing it was lacking for sure was weight. Peter was drawing on this experience he had at this zoo where this alligator had hissed at his daughter. Since that had freaked him out, that was what he wanted her to sound like. I heard somebody using the steam thing to clean a jug out a few days ago. I thought it would be cool to try, maybe fake an alligator hissing. The problem with using hisses alone is that you can't make it sound aggressive, or angry. It's just sort of a hiss, which is sort of personality-less.
Someone pulled up the sound of a Tasmanian devil over the internet, and it's just the most hideous sounding animal you've ever heard in your life. And so Katie Wood ended up going to the Taronga Zoo, where they have a couple of these Tasmanian devils in captivity.
There's one in the main enclosure, Salem, who, just pointing my microphone at her, she would scream ferociously.
The tricky thing in making a creature when you're going to use several different elements is trying to make sure that they all sound like they came from the same beast. These sounds, strangely, they all work well together.
Barry Osborne, one of the producers from the very beginning, has been very instrumental in encouraging interaction and really sort of cross-pollination of all the different departments. I mean, especially for us in the sound department, it means being able to see what the visual effects people are up to.
On this film, we had a great sound team, and they care greatly about their work. And they can only do their work well if they're informed. So I set up a way for the sound designer to get invited over to Weta to go to dailies.
Ethan Vandren and David Farmer came to my desk one day, and I showed them what we were working on, and the Shelob shots in progress, and they got excited about it.
Not only was Shelob in the scene, but she was fully rendered, and I could actually see what her mouth was going to look like. There were actually fangs in there, and these things are all inspiration for me as I'm trying to figure out what she's going to sound like.
About a week later, all of the Shelob animators trucked over to the sound studio, and we were just blown away.
It's so cool. Man, seeing that stuff really gives us ideas, too.
After hearing the sounds that Dave Farmer was starting to put together for Shelob, the Shelob animation team started thinking about giving Shelob's mouth a lot more character and definition.
That made us go back and try really hard to live up to the sounds.
Pelennor Fields was difficult because it's such a huge sequence. It's insanity. I mean, it's completely, it is the biggest battle I think I've ever seen put on film.
Although there's a tendency to kind of try and have everything playing at once, but to make it really busy and seem really big, it actually kind of tends to work against you.
The only way to deal with those chaotic battles is to figure out, first of all, what to lose. Because at the end of the day, if I played everything I had, it would be loud, of course, but it wouldn't be so much loud as it would just be sonic mud.
So you pull out everything but what is the most intense sound at any given moment. And then it's about switching quickly to another sound.
A great example is King Theoden thinking that they've gotten the better of the orcs at Pelennor Fields.
They saved the city!
And suddenly he hears this sound. And all we hear is these subharmonic booms.
And these sort of distant roars, which you can't quite identify. From that moment, we just sort of increase. We just let it all flow towards us.
One of the challenges with the Mumakil were that, let's face it, the giant elephants.
We had spent a lot of time recording elephants in different places. And that is the sound you would probably naturally expect to hear when you see these trumpets, these trunks go up, is that trumpeting sound.
And we all know elephants as these beautiful, gentle creatures. And so we didn't want in any shot for people to go, oh, the poor elephant.
And we played it back for Peter, and he's like, we don't want to hear that trumpet sound. It needs to be some kind of horrific bellow.
So I had to basically add tiger roars and a lion roar that was slowed down. But the lion roar is too long. So I had to take the beginning of the lion roar and the end, chop them together.
You have Mumakil's stomping around. And then, of course, their feet, which are, like mini explosions in themselves, and which have to feel huge so that we get the size of these animals.
If you actually go to a zoo and listen to elephants walking, they're quieter than people. So fortunately, I had a lot of material from working with the Balrog and the trolls to make footsteps for the Mumakil. Big tree crashes would be added to them, things like that. The thing that got interesting about cutting the Mumakil footsteps was you can't cut every one you see. You can't put a sound to every foot you see falling because it'll just be overload. So what we wound up doing was only cutting footsteps for the front feet. So rather than have for one guy, it's just. The death sound for the Mumakil had to be a little bit different than the rest of the Mumakil roars, so it wound up being largely a stud horse that was having the semen taken from it. This is more Discovery Channel interview, really.
Sometimes we get so into our jobs that we're willing to sacrifice our safety for getting the right sound.
I was in the corner of the room trying to keep a safe distance because of all the things I've recorded, which has been, tigers and lions and elephants, things like this, I think I was probably in the most danger when I was recording the horse in heat. It's actually pretty freaky.
A lot of what finally ends up in the film is redesigned very late in the process. Towards the end of the movie, when Frodo is trapped up at the Orc's Tower, originally we just came into that very, very quiet.
I think in the mix they realised there was really nothing kind of setting up the presence of the orcs down below.
We came up with the idea of, well, what if all these other orcs that are down below in the tower are just having this sort of drunken party?
But I wonder if, when he's upstairs, when they're upstairs having that big chat anyway, whether there could be some noise of orcs coming from down below.
Yeah, it seems like you could do some, if there's any holes in there up in the tower while the two are fighting, or some sort of backgrounds filtering up through that hole of all the.
Maybe we could have them playing a little jug band off screen, an orc jug band.
It seemed like it'd be a fun thing to do, so we just ended up dragging whoever was around the mixing stage at that point.
Yeah, drunken orcs. We're drunk orcs singing EXO. 5 minutes and then. Can I have some drunken orcs in about 5 minutes in Theatre 3, please?
Sure.
Drunken orcs. We can be drunken orcs. Thank you very much. You can have a drink if you like. Might help.
Dave's really kind of unique, and it was really good way of doing it would be to demonstrate how to do it. So he'd give us the line the way he wanted it, and then we'd have to try and follow him and do it again.
And Dave Whitehead did a few hours work sort of putting this whole drunken rhythmic party scene together, and I think it adds a real nice unique flavor to that scene.
Find the orc within yourself. Become that creature. That was the motivation, and they lapped it up. It was good.
A sound designer's dream really is to give life and spirit to things that, have no innate life or spirit, because that's something that we can uniquely do with sound effects.
Peter's brief about the ring was that it was an actual character in the film. And so it had to have emotions, and it had to have the power to actually influence in a discernible way.
The Smeagol Deagle scene, we remixed several times. More music, less sound design. More sound design, less music.
We started with a big music score there that went right through the oncoming fight. But it was covering up the darkness, the emotion that the sound design for the ring moment had built.
That's a place where, if you will, the score goes away, and we go into this more affected sort of musical sound design. In a way, heartbeat, rhythmical sounds.
What it does for me, and I think for the audience as well, is that it really puts the focus on the power of the ring to corrupt.
I think the sound helped sell the concept that the ring was doing this more than an individual was killing another individual. And it's a moment where sound design is as powerful as anything there because it helps tell the story.
The collapse of Barad-dûr was an interesting scene because we had finished the final mix on it and played it back for Peter, and he's like, well, this would probably be a good time to have a little spotting session about what we want this scene to sound like. And what he talked about was that he wanted this sort of unholy shriek to come out of the eye after the ring is melted.
You actually literally, you have to identify it as a scream of anger, pain, fear.
The trick will be trying to make the voice of Sauron more like a human, but trying to give this human voice enough power to actually rattle this tower and actually bring it down. We recorded ourselves screaming and used bits of things we had used for Sauron's eye in the past, some horsey type elements. Had to come up with a combination that all worked as one element that gave Sauron like a sort of a monster sound, but still kept him in sort of the human realm.
The collapse of Barad-dûr was difficult because with those horrific images that are ingrained in our minds of 9/11 and the collapse of the World Trade Center, I didn't want the collapse of Barad-dûr to evoke those images. I came up with the concept of making it break and fall apart like a glass tower. I said, listen, imagine this is crystal or glass and it's shattering, it's not exploding.
We thought, wow, that's really, really from left field, but that could actually work.
Dave Farmer at the last minute in the back room was able to be working on this scene as we're just plowing ahead.
Craig and I went out and got some glass bits and wound up breaking those. So we coupled that with taking another piece of glass and grinding it down into the shards of the other ones. It's just a great, nice element that makes the tower sound different than everything else.
It was crucial to have our whole team right there, so when we get these sort of redesign areas of the film, we're able to get the whole team going on making this happen quickly, and then we can keep moving forward with the mix on the movie.
The real creation of the movie, if you like, and its final physical form are created during post-production. And it's a process that I have huge respect for, the sound, the visual effects, the editing. It's just such a vital part of it. And I bought a New Zealand post-production facility a long time ago called the Film Unit. We actually mixed the first two Lord of the Rings films there.
In previous films, we'd have to drive all the way out to a place called Lower Hutt, about 45 minutes drive from Wellington every morning and every night, going back and forth.
Sometimes we'd be finishing at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting back, so it was tiring on everybody.
And Peter had this ambition to have a brand new sound mixing facility in Wellington. So he commenced on one.
It was interesting because, the construction was lagging behind the schedule of the film to some degree.
We were due to start mixing 15th of August. 9th of June, I moved into the building, and that's when we started installing the sound equipment.
We started looking at the rooms and thinking, wow, these are going to be fantastic, but, there's no floors, and there's no screen yet, and there's no board, and this would be maybe 2 weeks away from when we were going to start.
We walked in to start mixing as they were finishing the 3 sound mixing stages.
The only part of the building that was actually finished at certain stages were the sound rooms that were being used.
The mixers actually had to come to work to mix the film, walk through a construction site with jackhammers and saws and drills and hammering.
It would have been pretty close to having to wear like hard hats to go to the mix.
There were a couple times we had to say, You know, can you stop that drilling? Because, you know, we're mixing some kind of room tone where we're listening for every little detail, and there's this.
At one point, the person I was working with just threw up her hands and said, right, this is it. I cannot work under these conditions anymore. Construction has got to stop.
But that only happened a couple times, and it was really, really flawless. I mean, they have 3 of the best rooms in the world now.
So it was a very complicated and difficult process, and one that meant a lot of long hours and a lot of bleeding ears, but they did a good job. You know, it wasn't easy, but, you know, like everyone, they just hung in there and just plowed through it.
In as much as the film is a journey, the experience of working on it was very much a journey.
It's been one of the most wonderful work experiences of my life, certainly the most challenging.
Being challenged is a really good thing for creativity, because you can't afford to get comfortable with ways of doing things besides saying, well, we're going to get along, we're going to get through this together as a team, we're going to make this work.
It's a tough project to say goodbye to. It's not just any old trilogy. It's a pretty special part of history, and not just for the people that watch it, but for the people that worked on it.
I could walk away now and think, man, you know, I've accomplished such on this job and been involved with the kind of calibre of person that, you know, I could walk away right now and be very, very happy with my lot.
Chicken sweetener.
Sorry. Feels great. I mean, we're there. You know, it's like, you know, we finished Fellowship, we finished Towers, we finished Return of the King, and
here we are.
Well, here we are.
The greatest thing about this job is that we're still kids with it. You know, and all the pressures and all the schedules and stuff. But hey, man, we're making movies, man. It's great.
Don't worry, the scars heal pretty quick. In a few years, you will have blanked most of it out.
That's right, with therapy.
Yeah.